Welcome to the Public Safety Innovators Podcast. Connecting you with trendsetters who are leading innovation in public safety and expert advice on growing your own post-law enforcement business. And now, your host, Adam Wills.
Welcome to episode 40 of the Public Safety Innovators Podcast. On today's episode, we'll be having fellow Copreneur and member of the exclusive LEO to CEO community, Rudy Hernandez, on the show. Rudy is the owner of Trinity Executive Solutions, where he and his team offer bespoke security solutions for companies. During our chat, Rudy will share how his background as a used car salesman has helped him develop his sales prowess as a business owner, and how the LEO to CEO community has helped him grow as a Copreneur. Here we go. Rudy, welcome to the Public Safety Innovators Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm excited to be here and nervous.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. It's always fun to have community members from the LEO to CEO community on the show. We've been doing that a bit lately. I think you're maybe the fourth or fifth one here in a row from that's a member of the community on the show. And so obviously want to talk about what you're doing and highlight what you got going on. You've got some interesting things for us to discuss today.
Yeah, always trying to keep busy. But yeah, definitely I'm glad to be part of the community, and I'm glad to be on here.
Yeah, so you transitioned out of law enforcement yourself, and you started your own business, Trinity Executive Solutions. So I guess let's start there. What does Trinity Executive Solutions do, and what sort of problem are you solving?
Essentially, we started off as a provider for training. I think we're doing a lot of CPR training, security training in the private security industry. And then we moved into guard services, which initially it was just uniformed regular guards, but then we started moving into more, I guess, I don't want to say high risk, but just off-duty officer type gigs. We had a lot of active retired reserve police officers from different departments working with us. And, some of the clients that we have or worked with, a lot of them were requesting a specific, type of just, I guess protection. So if you will, not necessarily executive protection type stuff, but just, more higher end security. And obviously, with the law enforcement backgrounds, I think the private sector, that's what they're looking for. And so it's been, good to us over the years, thankfully. Obviously, from my background, I had a lot of connections, and then just the people that I've met over the years, it's just been really good. But essentially what we do is I'm kind of like a one-stop shop for the clients. And I think the ones that I build rapport with and the ones that I build those professional relationships with, it's something that literally I've been in contact with them continuously. And essentially what we solve is any issues that they may have that are security or safety related. So I sometimes act as a consultant. I act as giving recommendations or do threat assessments, coordinate, special projects, whether it be investigations or just, like I said, high risk stuff. So sometimes I act as a broker, if you will. A client will come to me, like let's say specific clients that I work with, and they have an issue, whatever that issue is, whether it's something internal, whether it's, threats as far as from maybe an executive that they just recently terminated. So especially nowadays with the whole workplace violence and the whole, mass casualty incidents and stuff like that, active shooters, there's a lot of, people are kind of, for lack of a better term, afraid, and with good reason. So a lot of the times we come in and just kind of assess, and then we do the whole just either trying to create things for their businesses or for their homes to, everything's a numbers game for me, a probability to minimize the risk. And then obviously we also do the whole physical part, where if they actually need physical protection or they need physical, security people and things like that. If I don't feel that I'm an expert in that arena, like let's say executive protection, I've worked in it, I've dabbled in it, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert in it. I'll reach out to someone. And that's the reason why I brought up the whole broker thing. Someone that comes to mind that I thought about in my head I haven't talked to him about it yet, but Scott Walker, he's a PI. That's something that, that's something that's usually things that I'm like, oh, I put that in the back of my head. So if I ever have a client that, hey, you know what, they need something specific, there's another person now that I could reach out to and be like, hey, because I'm not a PI. But like I said, that's where I come in for the clients as a broker to kind of any issues that they need, I go ahead and take care of it. I've gone as far as, coordinating janitorial services, for the client. And I think that's something that some people don't think about. It's kind of it's kind of outside the box. But it's being that go-to person for the client. I don't want to be the guy where the client comes and say, hey, can you take care of this? Be like, hey, that's not my job. Or, you know what? That's not my job description. I want to be the go-to person where I say, hey, Rudy, we have this issue. And I start to create solutions for it. Hence the name, the Trinity Executive Solutions. I think our slogan is, or not that I think, our slogan is, we don't provide a service, we provide solutions. And I think to kind of answer your question, I'm not sure if I've gone around it, is that's basically what we do is that, a lot of the guard services out there, they literally just provide a guard or they just provide a service. Not all of them, but like I said, some of the major ones, and I've been in the industry in a sense, boots on the ground. So I've kind of seen firsthand what happens out there. There's no ownership in some of these companies. And what I mean by that is that they're kind of so big or they're so disconnected from the actual client to where the guards or, even their ODOs or whatever, where I think the service, that whole, I guess, 4-star Michelin service or 5-star Michelin service, whatever you want to call it, but it's somewhat of a, I don't want to say concierge, but it's just something where, like I said, I want to be that one-stop shop go-to person. That's what I've been in. So I think essentially, hopefully I answered the question as far as solving a problem for the clients.
Yeah. So really your purpose, your attention is to be a bespoke solution, creating a custom option for your clients rather than necessarily just creating out of the box services and here's what you see and what you get. But really catering your response to whatever their needs are, whether that's something you are able to provide in-house with your company or whether you need to reach out within your network and your sphere of influence to identify somebody that can help fill that need.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for summing that up very well.
Yeah. So you first started off, you had a law enforcement career. What was your law enforcement career like? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when some of the guys that I've worked with, my experience pales in comparison to them, and that's why I'm very humble to where I'm knowledgeable. I started off very young, and I actually started off as a police explorer. For a small city department of about 100 and so sworn officers. And I had a lot of aunts and uncles, so to speak, growing up. So I got really mentored and trained. And, back then it was a bit different than what it is now as far as what we were exposed to and what we were trained on. So that's how I first started off. I got hired on right off the bat when I was 18 as a park ranger for the city of Southgate. And I was with them for a total of about 6 years. Unfortunately, got injured. Non-work related injury, no crazy shootouts or car accidents or anything like that. Got, injured, playing football at school at the time. And then, I believe at that time, I think I was about to be 22. I was in my early 20s, and it was just kind of devastating for me. I was going through different stuff, personally, personal matters as far as divorce and then just, child custody and just different things. And it was just kind of, that was something that it was almost like an ugly part of life in a sense. And I had to learn really young as far as how to handle stuff. But as far as my experience, as far as the city of Southgate with the park rangers, it wasn't necessarily Smokey the Bear mountains, out in the forestry. It was city parks. I usually clarify because people always think this, Smokey the Bear had, you're up in the, the mountains, this and that. I was like, no, not necessarily. Right. We work city parks. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of the things that we dealt with was, gangs, narcotics, transients, just because, a lot of the gang members, they'd hang out at the park, or they would, do their transactions at the park. So I got a lot of good experience there, a lot of somewhat scary stuff where it was like, that was a close one type thing, nothing too crazy, but definitely was an active city, if you talk to, people from around the area that are aware of it, it's a small city, but it's just, just west of South Central LA. I used to kind of joke around and say, yeah, we get the leftover gang members from South Central LA to come over to our site. But, there were some pretty few active gangs there. So I got a chance to work
the
with
rejects or
yeah.
what?
Yeah, I used to make fun of it in that sense. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty active city and it gave me a lot of good experience. And I was one of those guys where, I was just a super nerd with it. If I wasn't working, I was volunteering hours or I was, training on something. So I worked different types of bureaus. And I think I was really thankful to the guys that actually, the guys and girls, the officers, and that helped me out as far as just training me. Unofficially, we did tactical training, stuff like that. We would always play, the bad guys, but then the sergeants would take us out and then just kind of teach us everything. And so it was, like I said, I was very hands-on. I literally lived and breathed that department practically every single day for, about 6 years. And so when I got injured, it was hard. And it was something where there was a lot of stuff going on with the city. I won't get into that. I mean, people could probably Google it, the early 2000s or mid 2000s, as far as, some of the stuff that was going on with the city itself, and just the department was involved with that. And it was kind of ugly time. So I think a lot of times I say, you know what, I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly in law enforcement, the politics, some of that stuff. And like I said, that was kind of, it was difficult. And especially being young and just thrown into it. But, we grew up really quick, and so to speak. And I think we were trained that way. And once I got hurt, it was kind of different. And, it was a hard time. I'll say that. But the natural thing was to get into security. That's how I kind of was introduced to the private sector. I kind of had dabbled in it as far as when I was working with the city. I kind of, worked off-duty gigs and things like that, but it wasn't a full-time thing. It was just to, moonlight, if you will, or make extra money. But then when I got hurt, it was kind of natural when I fell into that. I first started working out in Malibu, Palisades, and, got exposed to the private sector there. And then I just kind of fell into it and just was embraced, just because of my background and just my training. And yeah, so that's how I got into the private sector.
There's some interesting correlations there between your story and mine, because I can similarly say that, I started my first experience in law enforcement was with an agency in the town that I grew up in upstate New York, with the Town of Greece Police Department. And you can similarly go back and Google what was going on there around the same time frame in the early 2000s. And just it was a good time. When I departed, it was a good time to depart. And, that wasn't my reason for departing, but there was definitely some politics at play that and some things that led to the old chief actually getting into some trouble. So interesting correlation there. But I'm curious, as far as your transition goes out of law enforcement into the private sector, similar to a lot of stories I hear from other copreneurs that have landed in, private sector, starting their own business, it a lot of the time is based out of this unexpected change in their life that affects their career. And as you know, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately, because I want to create a paradigm shift in this for law enforcement, I feel like we as cops, we go on the job and we know what the risks are, right? I mean, there's no surprise, I mean, we know what we're getting into every day when we put on the uniform and we go out and we put ourselves in situations that can potentially jeopardize our safety. So it's not like we don't know those things, yet oddly, it doesn't seem like we have the wherewithal to actually prepare for that. We don't plan for what's my contingency, what's my backup plan, so that when it's time for me to make that transition, I've got something, a file, so to speak, in the file drawer that I can pull out and I can execute on a plan and know that I'm going to be okay, and that there is a plan, rather than me just going, well, crap, now I'm hurt. Now I've lost my job, now whatever it may be, and I've got to figure it out. Do you think that you could have been more prepared than you were had you had that mindset? Or do you think, or did you already have that mindset and you were prepared for this transition?
Yeah, it's interesting you mention it. I was not prepared at all. The mentality there and the mindset that that we were brought up with, because I basically felt like I was raised there. And so the mentality was like, this is what we do and this is what we're going to do, in a sense, forever, in a sense, for 25, 30 years.
We all make
And
that
yeah.
assumption.
And so in that specific department was very peculiar to where you had to take steps. A lot of the people there were, they started off as explorers, they started off as park ranger, and it was almost like a tier system that they had set up. And so it was almost like it wasn't that, well, almost we were being groomed, in a sense, to serve, in a sense, the community for 25, 30 years. That was the mentality, at least in my mind. And it wasn't a bad thing. I think some people I've talked to, personal friends that aren't in it or have never been in it, they kind of see it as like, well, that's kind of weird. I said, well, no, it's just, that's the mindset. And so I guess to answer your question, I was absolutely just completely derailed, when I got hurt. And then just the things that were going on, like I said, the bad stuff that was going on with the department, there was just a lot of things. So it really, it was definitely just, it blindsided me 100%. And I was not prepared at all. And essentially the reason that I think Tim Caldwell, if I'm not mistaken, I think I heard his story, and that's what kind of drew me into, get into these communities where from one day to the next, it literally was just from one day to the next, I just couldn't go to work anymore. I couldn't go to work. And then other things happened, like on the political side, where I was like, that's it. And it was kind of like, I wasn't clear to go back to work because of my injury and this and that. And there's just other things going on. So literally the plan, so to speak, and the mindset of 25, 30 years of service, it fucking out the window. Sorry, out the window. And, and it was very difficult. And it was almost like survival mode and necessity mode, to where it's like, well, I need to do something. But it was very, very hard time, just emotionally. And then just with my personal things that were going on. So it's almost like it's an identity, in a sense. And I think it's to be for that to be taken away from one day to the next, it was hard. And then there was other things that happened that was just, it made it just that much more difficult. So to answer the question, no, I was not prepared at all. Could they have prepared us? I think in retrospect, and I think that's always, the whole hindsight bias, like, yeah, you know what, there should have been this, there should have been that. But I mean, nobody really thinks about it. I think everybody's gung ho about what they want to do. And like I said, it's one of those things where you either got it or you don't. The people that do this for a living, it's not because of a paycheck. It's not because of money. It's because literally it's a calling. And I think that, you don't think about anything else. But after everything happened, it was a survival mode type of thing where, well, I have to do this. Well, what's my skill set? Well, I have a certain amount of years being trained day in and day out on this. And like I said, thankfully, it did take me some time to kind of gain traction, because it was hard a few years after I separated from the department. But like I said, I learned, as I went, but it was definitely was alone, and I had to learn. That was one of the two things that just in retrospect now at this point, it was like, a big learning process. But yeah, definitely was not prepared for it.
Yeah. And that's such a natural progression too. I mean, that's a common story. That's a common story. I was the only reason I felt at all prepared for my transition was because I happened to have a business already that I was freelancing and doing on the side when I was still in law enforcement. But I certainly wasn't prepared for the timing of it, right? That wasn't the choice that I made, right? But I had something to fall back on. And while you're right, I mean, that transition period is so difficult for a myriad of reasons. There's no reason, and I'm telling this now to anybody everybody that's listening, there's no reason to exacerbate that by not being prepared with something, because I was prepared with something. And therefore, I feel like it made my transition smoother, which is why I'm so passionate now about trying to adjust this mindset in law enforcement to get people to have some sort of backup plan, even if it's nothing more than literally a piece of paper that says, if I get injured tomorrow and I can no longer do this work, this is the type of business I want to start. This is this is what I'm going to sell. This is who my target audience might be. This is what I might sell it for at my price point. And these are my first steps in order to actually execute on that. So when you're in the middle of that emotional state of, holy cow, this just happened to me and I wasn't anticipating it. And this isn't the timing. And I've had my identity stripped away. And you're dealing with all of those things. Having that plan makes it so much easier so that you don't have to be 100% in survival mode saying, how am I going to pay my bills and how am I going to put food on the table for my family, And so I appreciate you sharing that with me, Rudy. And I find it interesting too, because we just talked about this on episode 36 with Drew Aversa, where it's almost like this is something that is specific to law enforcement. And, we won't spend a ton of time on this right now just because I did talk about it with Drew, but in like firefighters, for example, they are primed for entrepreneurship. Like they just know naturally for whatever reason. I've never met a firefighter that didn't have a plan to start a business. The military even does a better job. They have people that will help coach you in what do you do after you're done with law enforcement. But for whatever reason, like you said, traditionally not with law enforcement, sorry, with military, for whatever reason, traditionally in law enforcement, we're bad at that. And we just assume we're going to be here for 20, 30 years and then I'll figure it out. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. And we certainly need to plan better for that.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And I think groups like, Leo the CEO, groups like, or even just people like, Scott Walker that are starting that conversation. I honestly, if I would have had this, back then, it would have majorly made a big difference. But I think especially now with, the current, societal temperature, if you will, with everything going on, it's definitely important for people in law enforcement to understand that, to maybe have that plan, that exit strategy. I think you've mentioned it, or you've phrased it that way, an exit strategy, which I think it's definitely something that's needed, especially now. But even I think more important, at least in my opinion, is letting them know that their skill set and everything they've been trained on is definitely, in a sense, something that can transition easily into whether it's, private security or whether it's the private sector. All it is just, it's a different perspective that they have to be able to look at it. Because I think sometimes in law enforcement, some of the experiences I had with some of the people that have been in it for a long time, they see it one way and it's hard for them to kind of shift the mindset to be like, oh, well, I could be good at this. I could be good at that. I have some friends now that, they're close to retirement and they've made comments saying like, they kind of don't know what they're going to do, because they've planned all the way up to, the 30th year of service. And then after that, it's kind of like, what now? But anyway, yeah, it's a really good topic. And I won't spend more time on it. So that, yeah, but
I think we have a habit of hoping that we'll have some sort of an epiphany by the end of that 20 to 30 year period that's just going to like fall on our lap and present to us an opportunity of what we should do. And so until that happens, we just keep kicking the can. It's interesting to me. I thought it was just me, but it seems like it's everybody. So,
yeah.
Well, so tell me, you've mentioned a couple of times what you've gotten out of being a part of the LEO to CEO community. What made you decide to join that community in the first place, and what do you feel like is the biggest thing you've gotten out of it?
Really what drew me to the community was, I think, taking my own advice regarding, the whole sales strategy, the whole stuff that I'm working on as far as reaching out, building rapport, networking. I think it was definitely part of that. Obviously, I started diving into LinkedIn a lot and just kind of, connecting with people on there. And what drew me to Leo the CEO was Scott Walker with his, post that he put on there. It really, just kind of struck a chord with me. I think it was Tim Caldwell, that conversation in particular, because he had something similar where he got injured and, he found himself not knowing what to do. And so I think that really, resonated with me and just kind of, I went to one of the meetings there, and then I think that's where we connected with each other. on one of those blue jean meetings or whatever it was. I can't remember. But yeah, that's where we connected. And I started looking into it. I was grateful that you mentioned it and that I got invited. I was like, yeah, definitely. I want to be part of the cool kids club, that's how, that's how I got drawn into, the community. And I think it really, I really see eye to eye with the mission, so to speak, as far as just, coppers helping coppers, so to speak, as far as either people that are transitioning or people that have already transitioned, or someone, like, let's say me personally, I've been in the private sector for a long time and I've kind of learned certain things on my own, but to know, like you said, that there's others out there that have either experienced what I went through or that are currently, trying to make that jump, that leap into the private sector or just out of, transition out. That's why I'm definitely just very, very blessed and fortunate that I was able to get introduced into the community. And like I said, I think what it's brought to me is just, like I said, I think one of the main things is that maybe a camaraderie, if you will, being able to connect with people that are actually going through or are, like, in a sense, helping others. I think I'm as cheesy as it may sound, I feel like I'm at a point where I want to assist whoever I can. And that's why I sometimes say, hey, I give a lot of unsolicited advice. But yeah, I try. I want to be able to help, and I think this is the perfect place to do it.
Yep, that's the awesome thing about the community is all advice is solicited. And I'm not quoting verbatim here, so there is no unsolicited advice. And
Right.
I'm not going to quote this here because I can't remember it, even though I wrote it. But one of the things that I had put into the community rules was that if you're going to be a part of the community, you have to be willing to accept both solicited and unsolicited advice and not get butthurt.
Yeah.
Because we have to be honest with each other. We have to offer each other feedback because the purpose is to help each other grow and build successful businesses, right? And so sometimes you got to hear hard things, and sometimes you got to accept unsolicited advice from people that says, you know what, your poop stinks,
Right.
So anyway, no, there's no advice that's unsolicited. And in fact, you have brought some very nuanced and particular advice to the community, really sort of around the area of sales in particular, because you have an interesting background in sales that kind of leads you to be able to provide some additional insight into that. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, I did have formal sales training, and I think that was very early on, right before, about a year before I started with the department, and that was really just kind of like the basic intro. And I feel that it is a bit outdated, but I think definitely with technology nowadays and everything, it really just still it works across all boards. And I guess with my experience in particular, I have worked in the private sector, but I also have been trained in just, account management and account sales as far as dealing with contracts, dealing with clients, specifically with a company that I was with. The vice president there was, I think, a ex-Chicago PD copper. He kind of took me under his wing, and he taught me a lot about the private sector industry. And in that, everything was just sales. When he taught me a lot of the stuff that he taught me, I was kind of like, oh, well, I've been through this training before, and now I'm using it more in practice, but in a different industry. Instead of selling cars, I'm selling guard services, or I'm selling, consultations, or I'm selling, training. So it's essentially the same thing. But yeah, like I said, I think a lot of it has been trial and error, but a lot of it comes down to just, your people skills. You're building rapport, and then just the follow up. And there's just persistence over time or whatever. But like I said, a lot of people, I think, get discouraged because they don't make that sale within the first few weeks or few months. And like I said, a lot of it is it's a long-term game. It's a long-term game. And I just, like I said, I do see it as
it
that.
Is.
Yeah. Yeah. But it definitely something, like I said.
Yeah, there's no.
It's okay. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say I agree with you. I mean, there's no, it's not a short-term game. And I think people get impatient in the area of sales, and they feel like, you know what, if somebody's curious about me, if somebody's interested in what it is I have to offer, whatever my whiz bang is, whether that's a product or a service, then I ought to be able to somehow convince them to buy it right now. And it almost
Right.
never works that way. In fact, it's something like 6% of people that come to your website are actually ready to buy from you.
Right.
It's certainly no more than that. And it really is a relationship. It's a process of nurturing, and we've talked about this in some of the workshops we've done with Leo to CEO, and you've talked about it in some of the posts and responses you've made to people in the community. But there's really a nurturing process that has to occur when it comes to sales, and I like to distill it down to, every relationship has these three phases, and that's curiosity, enlightenment, and commitment. And you can't skip any of those phases. If you think about it like you're dating, with the ultimate goal of getting married, you can't skip any of those, right? You have to start with curiosity. There has to be a period of enlightenment where you learn about each other before you ultimately get to commitment, right? And the same is true for sales. If somebody comes into you at the curiosity stage, you really can't anticipate you're going to automatically take them directly to the commitment stage and skip enlightenment. And that's why there's so many timeless principles. You mentioned that you felt like maybe some of the things that you had learned were a bit out of date, but there's a lot of timeless principles in sales that can be applied across different sectors, and really are able to adjust with the times. In the more online environment we have, that nurturing now is just becomes things like podcasts and email marketing or text message marketing or whatever. I mean, there's opportunities there. Um, there's tons of opportunities to fill that enlightenment void in order to speed that process up. But ultimately, you can't skip any of those phases.
Definitely 100%. I think one of the things that I remember from a sales manager was him saying, don't try to sell them anything. You're not going to be able to convince them. Don't sell it. It's like when they come to the lot, they've already decided whether they're going to buy or not. But now the decision is if they're going to buy from you or if they're going to buy from the guy down the street. So a lot of it comes down to, how good is your rapport? One of the things that we used to pick up on was they wanted us to be really good listeners, as far as people will tell you what they want, and you have to be able to pick up on their buttons. They used to call them buttons, as far as like what is it that what would be the sales pitch for them? And that's usually what I use as like what pitch do you give them, or what pitch do you want to show them where it'll convince them like, hey, this is what they want. One analogy or metaphor, however you want to look at it, that I like using is I'm a farmer. I'm out here just planting seeds. I'm over here just letting people know what I do and just seeing if it grows. Obviously, if we get a little sprout somewhere, we're going to go over there and start watering. Like you said, we're going to tend to it. We're going to, nurture it and see if that crop is going to feed us. And so a lot of the times, I jokingly tell people like, yeah, I'm just a farmer. I'm over here, just throwing seeds around. And you want to look at it as far as like the podcast. If you look at this podcast, it's reminding people, hey, this is what I do. This is what we do. And it's planting a seed. Someone somewhere is going to need a service, or it's going to, they're going to reach out, or they're going to get curious, like you said, tying everything into what we just talked about. They're going to get curious. They're going to want to learn more, and they're going to get enlightened. Once they're ready for that, whatever problem they have, and you're able to solve that problem, they're going to reach out to, and they're going to make a commitment. So it's almost like we're doing it right now, and that's why I always mention it. I'm a farmer. I'm over here just planting seeds, left and right, and see what sticks, so to speak. But yeah. I like that analogy, the farmer.
Yeah, I do too, actually, because what I always say to my coaching clients is sell results, not services, or sell results, not products, right? Because, and that's exactly what you're doing with that analogy. You're not selling the seed or the plant. You're not saying this is what I'm selling you. What you're selling is, what are you going to get from it once that plant grows? What are you going to be able to harvest off of that plant? I love that. That's awesome. Well, let's kind of transition onto another thing here. I want to know, Rudy, because part of what we talk a lot about in Elliott CEO is goal planning and that sort of thing. So what sort of personal or professional goals do you have for the near or immediate future? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question, Adam. I think, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that, obviously I have in the works, and some stuff's in the back burners. We shelve certain things. In particular, right now, obviously, I think one of the goals in general is just to kind of have a sustaining business where it's kind of on autopilot. I think that's all of us, that are copreneurs or inspiring copreneurs. But I think me in particular, one of the things that I brought to the forefront as far as a project that I'm working on right now is, a book that I mentioned, an ebook. Initially, it started off as just like, I'm gonna type this up for informational, for people. Like I had mentioned, I met a lot of people over the course of my travels, we'll say, that are, law enforcement, military people, and some of them are trying to start their own businesses or going into certain, the private sector. And I saw there was, I guess, somewhat of a need. And so I just started typing up. I guess initially it was a leaflet, and then I was like, it's a little booklet. And now I'm kind of, adding more and more. And I guess it'll be an ebook. I don't want to get people too excited about it, but yeah, I think the title of it is Intro to Sales and Farming. And so essentially what I want to teach there is kind of give people a bit of a introduction into sales. Because like I said, would I consider myself an expert? I would say no, but I do have formal training. I do have, extensive years, about a decade of actual trial and error of, what worked, what didn't work in my industry. And then, other people that I've worked with, it's worked for them. And so I think it's something that I'm breaking it down in a sense where it's kind of just tools for your toolbox. And I think a lot of cops, they resonate with that because that's what they've been told through, that's what they've been told through training, their entire careers is this is a tool for your toolbox. And so that's what I want to build. And that's what I'm building, I should say. And I'm writing this ebook, which is specifically that, how to teach someone that's new to either the private sector or someone that's transitioning out of law enforcement that, their entire career, they've just, had the blinders on, so to speak, and they're just, 100 miles an hour. Like you said, no one thinks after what they're going to do. This is something to kind of throw at them where it's a mini crash course, if you will, in the form of an ebook, specifically in sales, as far as how to prospect, what are leads, how to generate sales, how to, account manage, building rapport, and just, at least to me, I see it as this is stuff that it's almost as, everyone should know it, but it's just like one of those things where sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and it's one of those things where I do feel there's a need for it. And like I said, I'm at a point in my life, in my career right now where for some reason I just want to try to assist whoever I can, especially in these times with everything going on. But yeah, like I said, it's something that I've been working on it for, I want to say maybe started last year sometime. And initially, like I said, I was just typing stuff up as informational, but as I've gone along, I've noticed like, hey, you know what? I've been putting more and more into it. So hoping to be done with it, soon, within the next few months, hopefully, or maybe shorter, depending on how much time I put on it. And, sometimes I do get writer's block, so I just like to let it flow. But yeah, that's something that one of the main projects that I'm working on right now. Like I said, there's a lot of other ones, but we'll leave that for another time. I think one of the issues I run into is I got too much on my plate, so I got to really discipline myself and prioritize. So this is something that I feel, especially being part of the Leo to CEO community, I think that's what kind of set the fire for me to be like, hey, I got to get this done for these guys, because I do feel that there's a need for it, and I'm hoping that it'll really help people in guiding them and being successful, entrepreneurs and building businesses and whatnot. And I'm hoping that the stuff that I went through and the things that I learned through trial and error over the years, it's in a sense, it's not in vain. It's so that I could pass on that knowledge to people that are transitioning, and I think really that's what I'm really big on that right now, as far as just helping and doing what I can, doing my part, no matter how small or how big it may be. But yeah, that's why I'm definitely glad that we cross paths. I think it's for a reason, and I'm excited to be part of the mission, so to speak, as far as with Leo to CEO. But this book is definitely a reason why I really just kind of put it in hyperdrive and said, hey, I really got to get this thing out there for the people. But yeah.
I'm looking forward to that book. And you're right, writer's block is legit. It's real.
Yeah.
And I'm actually told you before, I'm working on a book right now as well, and that writer's block, man, it kills you. And finally, what made me feel better about it was that I recognized that all of the other content I'm putting out, both on this podcast and as part of Leo to CEO and the blog that I'm doing there and my email newsletter, I'm like, wait a second, I'm already writing the book, right?
Yep.
These are all pieces that are going to come together into the book later anyway. And that helped me feel a little bit better about it. But you're right. I mean, it's difficult to overcome that hurdle of writer's block. So either way, I guess I wish you all of my best and give you all my encouragement to finish that out and hit the finish line, because I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I know there's others that are as well. So on that note, I guess, Rudy, do you have a final thought you want to share with us?
I think for anyone that's, thinking of transitioning or in a position where whether they've separated from their agency or whatever it is, you're not alone. Initially when it happened to me, I really thought that I was the only one, and it was harder then because I didn't have any connections. But I think nowadays, programs like these, as far as, like I said, groups like Leo to CEO, and then just I know there's others out there. I think you're not alone. Don't go at this alone, so to speak. It's we definitely got your back, and I think it's something where reach out. I think reach out, and then just like I said, I think I can't say that enough, because there's a lot going on right now, and it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And like I said, you're not alone. Definitely know that you got a lot of support on this side, so to speak, as far as outside of service, and just to make sure that they know that. But yeah, aside from that, I think that's my final thought, Adam.
I think that's an excellent final thought, and I couldn't have said it better myself. So why don't you go ahead and send everybody off with, plug your stuff, let everybody know where they can find you. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think right now the biggest place where I'm at is just LinkedIn. You could search me on there. It's Rudy Hernandez. Trinity. If you type that in, it'll usually pop up right away. I try to stay active on there. I know there hasn't been a lot of stuff that I put up there. I do have a YouTube channel that I have connected on there, but everything's on my LinkedIn page where you guys are interested. Primarily just revolving around the private security industry and whatnot. But yeah, just for people that want to transition into that, they could always reach out to me via LinkedIn is probably the best way. So yeah, it's just Rudy Hernandez and then just Trinity. And then aside from that, the LEO to CEO community. I think that's where they could reach me and find us on. But like I said, yeah.
That's right. Awesome. Well, as always, everybody will, of course, put links to everything we discussed on today's show in the show notes of the episode, which you can find at psi.chat and then / the episode number. So go ahead and check that out there. We'll put links to everything. And yeah, Rudy, awesome conversation. Good to have you on. Really appreciate you and everything that you bring to the community. And it's just neat because the whole concept I had behind that community was not to revolve around me or any one individual, but was truly to be a collaborative environment where everybody got to bring their strengths to the table in order to help each other out with whatever their weaknesses may be. And so you are certainly a good example of that, and it's been great to have you along. So thanks for that, and thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review at psi.chat/review. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other public safety innovators like yourself find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to psi.chat, click on episodes, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.